Welcome to the Earned Media Podcast. My name is Eric Schwartzman, and I'm a digital marketing consultant based in Santa Monica, California. But I started in earned media. Before the internet, earned media was media relations, or rather the part of public relations that's focused on message delivery to and through impartial, unbiased news media sources. Today, online influencers, bloggers, podcasters, and other content creators or makers have expanded the chorus of third-party voices to speak to and through. But at the same time, the migration of ad dollars to the web has gutted the trade and mainstream media landscape. So while there may be new influencers and bloggers out there to pitch, when it comes to ad-supported media outlets, there are fewer reporters and fewer opportunities for coverage. And keeping track of the news media has always been challenging, but now it's more challenging than ever. Our guest today is Sam Whitmore. He is a former media columnist for Forbes.com who spent 14 years at Ziff Davis, 12 at PC Week as a reporter, editor, columnist, and the editor-in-chief, and as an on-air host for ZDTV before leaving to launch Sam Whitmore's Media Survey in 1998, which provides tech media analysis and consulting to tech PR pros and media buyers. Sam, welcome.
Eric, good to be here.
But before we get started, I want to tell you about something really cool that we're doing in the next episode. So the number one trend that digital marketers need to know, according to the Talkwalker 2021 Social Media Trends Report, is that young consumers are more socially conscious than ever before, and they want to engage with brands on topics that had previously been taboo, like mental health and inclusivity and social justice. On the next Earned Media podcast, we have an expert panel of B2B social media influencers to discuss the Talkwalker 2021 Social Media Trends Report, which predicts the top 10 social media marketing trends for 2021. Now, the report is at ericschwartzman.com/Talkwalker. And I'm going to go ahead and post that to the chat right now as well. So download the report, and in the next podcast, Jenny Dietrich, Neil Schaefer, and Christina Garnett are going to go deep on the top social media marketing trends for 2021 from Talkwalker, which is a social media analytics platform. Some of the other top trends for 2021 include the rise of digital disinformation, mimetic media, the 4 C's of COVID content, and much more. Again, the Talkwalker 2021 Social Media Trends Report is at ericschwartzman.com/Talkwalker. So join us for the next episode and our expert panel of social media influencers. Sam, welcome to the Earned Media Podcast.
Thank you, Eric. Been a long time.
It's been a long time. So what is Sam Whitmore's Media Survey?
What is it? It's a consultancy designed to help the senior AEs of the world pitch more effectively. Now, that ranges from account coordinators and interns all the way up to founders in terms of comms agencies. And also we have Autodesk and Oracle and lots of tech vendors too, but primarily it's a service to help bring a tailwind to the put upon, overworked publicist that's trying to get a message across to B2B and B2C media.
And what led you to launch the Media Survey?
It was a total accident. I was working at Ziff Davis in the event group, the people that ran Comdex and then went on to do other trade shows. And there was something that went down that I felt was unethical, and I quit on principle, walked out of there, gave them 2 weeks notice, but I didn't have a plan B. So one day after my notice, I sent an email to PR people. And I said, now that I don't work at PC Week anymore, I'm going to tell you the secrets. Okay, if you're pitching InfoWorld, don't say this, say that. If you're pitching Computer World, don't say that, say this. And I went through this whole cheat sheet kind of thing. And every single PR person that I wrote back and said, "Oh, is that why you quit? Oh, that's cool. Nobody does that." So I thought, maybe that's what I should do. And that was 22 and a half years ago. So I backed into it.
Got it. Hey, what makes technology PR different from other industry specializations?
Oh my. In the old days, back when Bill Gates and Michael Dell were trying to convince people that technology was important, technology was sort of a discrete thing, right? It was sort of a silo. And now technology, as you well know, is inherent in every aspect of human life. And you got cops knocking on your door saying, "Hey, can I use your Ring doorbell video? We thought we saw a prowler." I mean, where does it end, right? So the thing about tech edit is that it used to be sort of a section like sports, right? Had boundaries around it. And now it's very difficult for editors and publishers to really put boundaries around tech because it just infuses everything.
Yeah, it's basically a part of every other beat at this point.
And
But
so
at
it's
the
tough.
time, and most examples you were mentioning were consumer technology. Back in the days of Walt Mossberg and David Pogue and these sort of consumer technology columnists that had so much power. Talk to us a little bit about B2B tech PR. What is B2B tech PR?
Yeah, that's where I came from, man. That's where I came from. And I was trained very carefully to understand that B2B editorial, and I'll back into the PR thing in a second, but B2B editorial is service journalism. And so there's two communities, right? There's the buyers and the sellers. As an editor, I fly the flag of the buyer. I want to provide perspective, data, pricing info, case studies, everything I possibly can to make the buying decision easier and more effective. If I'm on the supply side of things, and there was lots of editorial interest in B2B edit, it's like, well, what's going on the competitive landscape? What does the reseller landscape look like? All of the sort of supply side issues and trade media, B2B trade media also concentrates on that. So if I'm in B2B PR now, I want to provide value. And actually, it's really, Eric, it's sort of a form of professional development, right? You want to be a better professional on the supply side if you're on the supply side. And likewise, you want to be a savvier buyer on the demand side. And B2B PR always has that in mind. Just as journalists see themselves as service journalists, PR people also need to see themselves in service either to the supplier or the buyer.
Break that down for us, supplier, buyer, because it seems sort of inside baseball. So can you just sort of dumb it down for me a little bit?
Well, if you're a software vendor or if you're an integrator or a reseller and you sell technology products and services, then you have a particular set of needs. Now, if you're in B2B PR, you're probably representing that community in some way, shape, or form. And good B2B PR sort of gets out of that and role plays in terms of what would buyers want? What would the demand side want to be hearing from us besides me, Tarzan, you, Jane, and we're better than the other guys. And bad B2B PR is a little bit lopsided, favoring the messaging of the vendors and the people that are out there selling the stuff, because that is not helpful to buyers, right? If they want partisan, we're great content, they can go to the vendor's website and read it. The the editors want balance.
So make it practical for me, and I'll just throw out an example, but you can change it if you want to use another one. Like if you were consulting with a CRM provider and you wanted to help them present a message in a way that would resonate better with journalists, how would you go about that? What's your process?
If I were representing a CRM company, I would want to frame the value proposition in terms of, let's say, flexibility. We have the best API set where we can integrate with anything under the sun that any customer of ours could possibly integrate into the dashboard. And we're easier to program and maintain the code for, and we're also easier to do business with anybody else. See, those are value propositions for buyers, not for the company themselves. So that's an example.
Because they're not unique, and like pretty much everybody in B2B tech throws around productivity gain, interoperability, the same stuff. It's so hard to find a unique differentiator. Does it matter?
Oh, it totally matters. I mean, there's an ecosystem beyond just what you claim as a vendor. There's the analyst community, there's case studies, there's reviews like on G2 or heck, even Yelp. I mean, there's or Glassdoor. Man, that's a great place to work. They recruit and retain top people. So there's a lot of different inputs beyond just the messaging that goes into the persona that B2B companies can put out there.
It's a great point. When I talk to millennial buyers, they're all over G2, in spite of the fact that most of the G2 reviewers are going to be either frontline workers or maybe middle managers. You're not getting a lot of sort of C-suite perspective there, but it is definitely influencing the buying, process. It's definitely influencing the shortlist. That's for sure. How have you seen tech media change broadly over the last 20 years?
Well, beyond the cliche that it used to be in print.
Yep.
I think part of it is the expertise, the IQ, product reviewers, thought leaders. They were all highly concentrated in media brands because media brands had the means of distribution. The internet was still out there. I mean, I started Media Survey in '98, which was only 4 years after Andreessen came up with the browser there. But it was still sort of the Wild West, and most decision makers relied on media brands either in print or maybe a little bit online. But what happened was, when search became the obvious thing, like I can learn about anything at any time. Okay, now I'm less dependent on media brands because I have instant self-service through search. Also, the talent would gradually get headhunted out of the media brands, particularly in B2B. I don't know if you remember the old days when there's like a dozen, 2 dozen publications, all of whom had labs, and they would review products thoroughly. But that stopped gradually because the lab directors were getting paid twice to go work for Cisco or go work for Oracle, and there's this big talent drain. So those are the two big things: the impact of search, which allowed you to get information at your fingertips, and then the other thing was the talent drain that media brands just simply couldn't pay the really smart, hands-on people enough.
I mean, I can remember early into it when journalists started to take early buyouts as a result of ad revenue moving from the classifieds over to Craigslist and advertising revenue moving over to pay-per-click. And the big challenge as a PR person was I didn't, when I was pitching stories, I wasn't confident that the person that I was pitching to had been on the desk long enough to have enough perspective to put the news in context.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it's a real problem. And it seems to still be a problem, no?
Well, this gets into a whole other branch of our conversation. We may as well get into it now. The fact is that the editorial side of B2B now is in the attention aggregation business, which means if you go to Computer World right now, which is like the venerable B2B computer publication, it was launched in 1967 before y'all were born. And if you go on that site right now, it's all tips and tricks, where it's, here's how Azure, here's some Azure error messages and what they mean, or here's how to manage your migration. And it's out of the news business, because that sort of stuff is like hardcore service journalism, but it's sort of residual content. It's just as valuable next month as it is today. And so they just have not been able to employ the same sorts of people that they used to. And so they've just sort of changed what it is, what their value proposition is, that it's much more long tail. Let's put it that way. A lot of the B2B publications that I study, they're really getting into the long tail business. And maybe they don't have big spikes when Apple announces a big machine and all that, but over time, they get this steady content on this pavilion on digital transformation. What's new in digital transformation? And it's sort of like incremental, but it's like rock solid, reliable traffic all the time, 365. That's a big change.
Yeah, organic search traffic is much less volatile than news cycles. But I wonder, I look at like the podcasting space. There's a lot of this is a podcast about digital marketing, and this specific podcast is about the earned media component of it. There are a lot of podcasts about digital marketing, and the ones that are the most popular are the daily short form podcasts. So they don't really go deep at all. They're the same sort of content that you just mentioned. And you think about sort of the attention scarcity market that we're working in today. Do you think, is there a market for long form content, or do you think that is pretty much going to die?
No, it's never going to die. In my world, long form content, particularly in podcast, is in the really dweeby deep tech stuff. I'll give you a couple of examples. There's a brand called Packet Pushers, packetpushers.net. I don't know if you've heard of them. There's like one guy in the US and two people in the UK. And they have a little bit of earned media, but mostly it's vendor sponsored deep podcasts about these particular APIs and that particular platform from Juniper that just came out, and let's get behind this and let's open the hood and see what we got here. That's long form, very successful, enduring content. That brand has been around 10 years and they've made money incrementally every year since they launched. And that's because the scarcity of the tech info in every other realm, even Gartner and Forrester don't get super dweeby technical. The analyst firms deal in implications, right? How it's going to affect business overall, or this segment, that segment. So if you're really technical, you have to go to a podcast. So I would imagine, and I defer to you, Eric, because this is your world, but I would bet that like back when ad tech was it was still on the way up, I'll bet that there were a lot of podcasts that really got into the technical backgrounds of some of the ad syndication networks and sort of the ones and zeros of it. Do those podcasts still exist?
They do, but they're niche. They're niche podcasts. And if you think about the long form content that's out there, the Leo Laporte stuff.
Yeah. Okay. He's super technical.
Or the Steve Gilmore stuff.
Technical.
That's basically a bunch of guys sitting around shooting the shit for 3 hours. And it doesn't really have much residual value because it is newsy and they are talking about what's happening on today. And it's the type of thing you have on in the background as you code. It's not appointment or subscription media.
Yeah, but they're still doing conceptual stuff. If I were a team leader in DevOps, development operations, I wouldn't get that much out of the Gilmore gang. But I would get a lot out of like the new stack, or if I cared about Kubernetes, or if I cared about open source and security, 0-day things, 2020 0-day problems within open source. Steve Gilmore is not going to talk about it, but new stack would, maybe even like an InfoWorld might. So I think the positive horizon for B2B content long form is the more technical it is, the more loyal the audience, and the more bankable the audience. So that's what I see from where in my world.
I was talking to a friend about, the pandemic and life on Zoom. And he looked at me and he said, "My life is so boring. I just go from Zoom call to Zoom call. It's killing me. I can't look sideways. Everything is boring." It's like I am bored stiff. And we've seen more change. Like I just published a post-pandemic email marketing best practices guide. We have seen more change in email marketing in the last 6 months than in the last 6 years. So here's my question. When it comes to tech media, how has tech media changed since the pandemic?
Depends on what neighborhood you're looking at. I did a couple of big editorial audits in March. And what I found was B2B journalists weren't the least bit affected. They said, our readers still have projects to complete. They have products to buy. Life is marching on. And more than ever before, our systems need to have integrity. And so we need the same sort of stuff we've always needed. That surprised me, right? I'll just keep it within B2B because that's our framework for today. Come July or August, then it became more like work from home, or like my favorite piece was ZDNet did a piece on, oh, you have one of these? You have one of these? And, oh, you're working on confidential information that normally would be a no-brainer if you went to the office. Do you unplug this thing? Because if you don't, you might be legally liable. You don't know who hears this. I'm holding up for people that are listening audio only. I'm holding up an echo. And so in phase 2 of the pandemic editorial response, it went from nothing to see here to, oh my God, now the workplace has changed, and that has a direct impact on supply chains and all that other stuff. So we're on the cusp right now between phase 2 and phase 3. And now that the Northern Hemisphere is cooling off and a lot of the let's open up for business is sort of retrenching a little bit, it's going to be interesting to see how editors respond in phase 3. But those were the two distinct phases in 2020.
Just a note to listeners, if you're interested in the state of voice search, I just interviewed the CMO from SEMrush, and they just published a report on the state of voice search for Amazon Echo, for Siri, and for Google Assistant. And I'm posting a link where you can get that in the chat there.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Is there a lag?
No, I hear you great.
Okay, good.
Let me ask you, what is the role of social media in tech PR?
That's changed too. If you were to ask me 3 or 4 years ago, I would say, well, the audience development people sit down with the editors and they look at all the social shares, and you might want to sort of skew the next quarter's worth of headline writing or coverage decisions based on what really resonates out there. And that's changed. And it's changed because the algorithms in a lot of the platforms have become less organic. And a lot of people are not simply sort of surfing their feed now to say, oh, I'll just read whatever is served, because it's much more commercial. So I think that the inside the psychology of a lot of the B2B publishers, they're moving away from, let's see if we can broaden the readership tent and get more people to come to our site. The advertisers are really pushing the publishers for more engagement. They're less concerned about the numbers, the gross numbers, and they're much more concerned with engagement, time on site, and they are also concerned with authority. Like, does a particular B2B publication really have, go down to bedrock on X? And so I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. IDG made a decision in early 2020, IDG is a very big global tech publisher, that they would ask their publications to play particular roles. So for example, with digital transformation, all of the editorial content is concentrated on CIO.com. Sort of makes sense. But you can barely, if you search Computer World or InfoWorld right now and type in digital transformation, you'll see basically bupkis, which is really unbelievable, except when you think about, well, if I'm IDG, I want everybody to play their position. So all the digital transformation stuff, I'm going to house within CIO.com. I'm going to have a lot of cross-linking, and the algorithms are really going to reward authority and going to boost my page rank because I have this disproportionate concentration of digital transformation stuff on one title instead of distributing it confetti-like, all the way across the portfolio, right? It's the same sort of thing with crypto. All the crypto stuff that IDG runs, it's concentrated in Computer World. You won't read much about crypto at all in Network World or Info World, or because there's been a programmatic decision to concentrate fertile topics within a single title. And that way it's just easier to cross-link and increase time on site, because we all know, oh, read more about this, read more about this. Well, you want people to do that to stay on the site. So that is a very big change, and I think it's a smart change.
So what I'm hearing is that there's almost like a keyword landscape that you can attach to different media outlets. And I'm wondering if, there's any merit in, sort of taking those different outlets' websites, plugging them into some sort of a search marketing tool like an Ahrefs or an SEMrush or a Moz, looking at what keywords they're ranking for, and then actually targeting your pitches based on those keywords.
Let me tell you something. In my world, there aren't enough people like you that could just connect those dots fast. I mean, you understand what pillar content is. And you've been on the HubSpot site and all the glossaries and all the stuff, right? Like in my world, I come from the earned media world, and everybody's like scratching their head saying, what is this stuff? But the audience development people and the top editors and the publishers are all over this. So absolutely. I mean, I've written about this a couple of times. If I'm in PR, I really want to know, like, pay attention to the pavilions and the special reports on the site, and look at what it is that their core content is, and pitch to it, because that's the tailwind. Use the tailwind. So that is really how I see B2B changing this last 2 or 3 years. And social media, to get back to your original question, is less important because there's too much one and done. Too much churn. They don't care about it because the advertisers penalize that. They want smaller numbers of readers who spend more time on the site.
So we've got Sally Olmstead in the house. Sally Olmstead was my colleague at Rogers & Cowan. She ran tech PR for decades, man. She knows everybody. So she can pick up the phone and she can call somebody. But there may be a lot of other people in this call here who are newcomers, who are new to tech PR. They don't know anybody. They don't have anybody's number. Nobody's going to take their call. So what do you have what advice do you have for newbies on breaking through and building relationships with tech reporters?
Well, I'm going to use an agricultural metaphor. It's like, if you want to harvest something, you can't just do it in 48 hours. You've got to think about all the environmental factors, and you've got to take calendar time in order to do it. That doesn't help you in the short term, but in the long term, there's no substitute for downloading the media kit, reading the about page, going to LinkedIn and looking at the masthead, and then looking how the editors describe the properties that they work for. Look at their Twitter bios and look at how they describe the publications that they work for, and just immerse yourself in the psychology of how these editors think and what they think they're doing. And then factor that in using language that they themselves use, either individually or, at the brand level. Use that language in your pitches so that they immediately, no matter what it is that you're pitching, they sense an affinity, like, wow, these people, sort of know what we do. 98 out of 100 PR people are staring at spreadsheets, looking for targets, looking for contact info. They have, quotas to meet, and they aren't the least bit qualitative. And the more junior you are, the less qualitative you tend to be. I think it should be the opposite. The less you know, the more analytical you should be up front to put yourself in the position of the culture and the mission of the people that are keep clicking these stories out, and try to simulate how they think, and then use those concepts in your approach to them.
I've long believed that it's actually an economics problem, because, clients come to PR because they want coverage. And just because, even if you write the perfect pitch to an editor, there's no, guarantee they're going to read it. They may just dump it anyways. And so, casting a broad net does matter. It does increase your chances of getting some coverage. And then that leads to the whole spray and pray approach, which I don't think is effective, but I understand why it is what it is, because PR people feel like they've got to cast a wide net to get coverage, because that's why the clients came to them in the first place.
I think you're right. I have learned some things over the years, though, and that is the acronym SOV, right? Share of voice. And what I've found is you'll get some clients that want coverage by the pound, but the better clients out there will say, I'm willing to do an exclusive with TechCrunch or whoever you think I should do an exclusive with, if I get a couple of things in return. Number one, some prominent play. And also, I don't want this story scrolling off the front door in 90 minutes. I want to, negotiate some sort of like ongoing presence. And I'm going to pressure you, Mr. or Ms. agency person, to see that, the story, to the best of your ability, the story is really based more or less on us. I don't want to wind up in a trend story. I don't want my big news or my funding round or my new CEO or whatever the news peg is. I don't want to see that subsumed in some trend story. I want to be the story. This is my big thing. So I think a good agency has the chops to be able to amplify share of voice, and other agencies, may not be as good as that. I think that's a frontier for how agencies can compete with one another, is competing on share of voice, not necessarily volume of coverage, but SOV. And this is one of the things that I do. I have these meetings, all week long with the people ranging from account coordinators up to the founders. And, this is a big deal, particularly the in-house ones, not the agency ones, but the in-house ones. They want to be the star of the show. And so that's a challenge for everybody, but I make a living at it.
Yeah. Hey, when I was in public relations, one of the accounts my agency represented was the Grammy Awards. And we would actually greet the winners of the Grammys in the wings and escort them through a backstage press room organized by media format. So we had a section for photographers. There was a section for print news media. There was a section for television and radio. And there was a section for individual outlets who commanded big audiences like MTV and BET and VH1. And the last year that I worked in that press room, there was a new section, new area that we were told to bring the winners by, called the Internet Room. And, there was this Internet Room, and they were going to try to do two things that at the time were very innovative. They were going to try to do live text chat, and they were going to try to upload images to the internet in real time. And I remember, bringing people by the Internet Room and, trying to get them to stop. And I could not convince anybody of any scale to stop at the Internet Room. So we got best new age artist and, all the smaller winners that weren't welcome in the one-on-ones would stop by the Internet Room. But I remember seeing it and thinking to myself, man, we've been credentialing media for the last 6 months. We've been turning 80% of them away because of fire marshal restrictions. And now you can just bring the internet as a portal right into this event. It's going to change everything. And I actually left the agency and I launched a company called IPR Software, which is an online tool that lets people manage an online newsroom and kind of like, the one at the Grammys. Today, actually, IPR Software, which I sold about 5 years ago, and I'm still on the board, but I'm not involved with the day-to-day, is much more than a newsroom service. It's actually a digital asset management platform, and it powers content marketing websites. And it does it for startups and small business, but also enterprise. Verizon's a customer, LinkedIn's a customer. So as you look out at the next year and you think about how you're going to improve your productivity and compete more effectively online, particularly at a time when trade shows and conferences are no longer an option for generating deal flow, check out PR Software. You can check them out at ericschwartzman.com/IPR Software. They're offering the first month free through the end of the year for Earned Media Podcast listeners. So tell them we sent you. Sam, what's the best way to engage B2B online influencers?
Here's how I would do it. I think people do it the hard way by pitching them or say, hey, that was a great column or whatever it is. I think the best way to influence someone is to identify the people who the target thinks are important and be mentioned by those people, and to create credibility. So I'll give you an example. I use a tool called TweetDeck. I build columns within TweetDeck. If I want to get to know somebody, if I want to pitch an editor to get them to do an interview with me, I look at who follows them and I create a column in TweetDeck, and I look at who their support system is and who they tweet with, and I work back from there. And so when that editor hears my name from somebody, maybe they don't hear it directly from me, but they might hear it from that person at Carnegie Mellon or wherever it is. It's a word of mouth, right? So I think that's the single most effective way to get on the radar of a B2B influencer is understand who they look up to, who they consort with online, particularly on Twitter, and get to know those people and work back from there.
Talk to us a little bit about the state of the industry analyst sector. Is that a healthy sector? Are B2B technology companies just as eager to brief them as they ever were? And what, if anything, has changed in that world?
Remarkably little. There's probably more people that sort of go out on their own, but the analysts were greatly benefited by the demise of the technical chops of the press. When the trade media became unable to deliver the real muscle tissue of how technologies worked and what the implications were, they picked up all that business. And the other thing that they were smart about is they really invested in face-to-face events. Now it's interesting to see what's going to happen, right? Because they have to recreate the magic of their face-to-face events online, and that can be done. It's becoming apparent through Hopin, and there's a couple of other platforms out there that you could probably deliver effective face-to-face events. But beyond that, the thing that the analysts have that the reporters don't, and after a couple of beers, I've had many a reporter complain sort of enviously about analysts because the vendors and the technology people and the vendor community can talk to analysts confidentially. Whereas reporters, you're always playing cat and mouse, right? They always want you to be on the record. So the people who really know stuff are much more comfortable talking to analysts, and it works on the case study side too. Analysts can call up any sort of Procter and Gamble, whatever conglomerate, all the way down, airlines, and they can get the inside dope about whether a product really works or not. That's why I mentioned G2 earlier, Eric, because those software reviews are as close as the public can get to how a B2B product or something as a service, actually works in the real world. Analysts have total carte blanche. They know all that stuff. So that's why if I were budgeting, if I were a CMO and I were budgeting, I would make sure I would budget maximum money for at least one of the mega people like Gartner or Forrester, and then one or two niche analysts within a particular segment. And I would over budget for that. And I know that might be a apostasy from an editor saying that, but honestly, if I were CMO, that's what I would do. And those are the reasons why I would do it.
I remember in the days when digital advertising was growing up, there was that famous comment, and I think it was from Les Moonves at the time he was the head of CBS, and he said, we're being forced to trade our analog dollars for digital pennies.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And so you think about what you were saying with respect to live events.
Yeah.
Sure, maybe they could be recreated online, but we have this perception that stuff online isn't quite as valuable from a monetary standpoint as stuff that's tangible or analog. So I wonder, what do you think? I mean, as COVID looks like it's going to be around for a considerable time here.
I agree.
So what do you think in terms of how this is going to impact the analyst firms? I mean, they were relying on these major events for revenue. They don't have that anymore. You see that when they convert these events to virtual events, they can't charge as much. So how do you think that nets out for them?
I think in 2021, they're going to take a little bit of a hit, but I think also that there's going to be a new kind of marketer who's going to be able to specialize in monetizing the activity of people who participate in online events. Because if you just push everything back a little bit, online events, it's not like badging somebody and you're walking around the sands in Las Vegas. I mean, every single freaking thing that anybody does on that platform. It's all recorded. So it's the same thing as a website. You can build really smart analytics and maybe do some data cross-tabbing and really dig into the behavior of people who participate in online events. And then you've got a very compelling sales story if you can figure out how to monetize it, who wants to pay for that. So, but CMOs, because this thing is so 2020, nobody has that inherent skill. But you watch as people churn through marketing jobs, and there's going to be a premium paid for people who had experience in 2020 monetizing the data and the behavior, whether it's cross-selling content or cross-selling memberships or creating new partnerships. There's a lot of things that could be fungible in terms of value, but we're only in 0 year here. We're in 0 year right now. But if I were a CMO, I mean, 20 years ago, if you specialized in social media, and social media was around 20 years ago, people don't really remember that, but that was around. With what the hell was that music site? MySpace. You know what I mean? It was like early days. But if you knew a lot about that then, you could get top dollar as a professional because you had this sort of niche understanding of something that was on the way up. So I think that's what I would do if I were Gartner, Forrester, all that. I would understand how to monetize that stuff.
Let's get back to media. So, there's been a number of sort of it girl media outlets in the tech space. I think about Red Herring. What a hot that was. I think
Speaking
about
of 20 years ago.
Industry Standard.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Remember what a hot publication
that old.
was? So let me ask you, who's the it girl now in the tech space?
Well, literally the it girl is Jessica Lesson, who runs a subscription-only site called The Information. Pound for pound, my opinion, they have the highest IQ any publication there is. And not a lot of people read it because it's expensive. It's like $350 a year, and you can get a advanced subscription for $750 a year. But they have headhunted people out of Forbes, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, the trades, and they have unbelievable, highly skilled staff, and they're very aggressive reporters. And their audience is like upstream. The people that subscribe to that stuff are VCs and people who are sort of on the funding and sort of the rainmaking side of things. And they have tremendous credibility. Without a doubt, to me, and they've been around, I think, 5 years, maybe, something like that. In terms of broad reach, CNBC and Business Insider are neck and neck for sort of like our generation of Forbes and Fortune. CNBC gets absolutely enormous traffic, and they have the video, they have the television, they have this sort of integrated footprint that BI would love to have, but they don't, you know. So those three publications are must. Like The Information, which is industry stuff and a lot of B2B in there, and then CNBC and Business Insider.
And
notice I'm not saying the Journal.
Who else besides that online? Like, what about, there's an outlet called Cheddar that does a lot of business coverage. I mean, there's a lot of these new players out there sort of popping up. Are they on your radar?
Yeah, they're on. Cheddar's on my radar, but the thing is that they don't, you know, in a world of platforms, new media brands just pound for pound aren't as interesting anymore. You know, no one really cares about Cheddar. You know, they don't. But I'll tell you to give you a sincere answer and not to deflect it. I would, if I were in PR and marketing, I would pay a lot of attention to Medium, because Medium is both a platform where anybody who can fog a mirror can post on Medium, but Medium also has invested in its own publications, its own Medium developed brands, right? So they have 10, which is about technology and science. They have a publication called Marker, which focuses on small business, and they've been able to recruit a lot of pretty high-end talent for those publications. Dave Gershgorn quit Quartz to go over there. Damon Barris is the editor-in-chief of 10. He spent many years at Huffington Post. And so I know time is short here, so I would just say read up on the Medium publications. And collectively, I think that's sort of a newish source of influence going forward.
Any thoughts on for folks on the call that are in digital marketing and PR and kind of want to look at technology in that space? Any outlets you like for that?
For the sort of the digital marketing stuff?
Digital marketing technology, email marketing technology, social media marketing technology, media monitoring technology. I mean, it's a niche space, so.
Well, there's titles out there, but there hasn't been a lot of investment by publishers in that space because there's been contraction in the space, and the publishers are like totally trailing edge indicators. You know, they follow the money, but almost when it's too late to do so. So, you know, you got the ClickZs and the Drums and, you know, those sorts of publications. The thing that I would pay attention to is the burgeoning world of newsletters and podcasts. And we haven't mentioned Substack yet. Substack is totally flavor of the month out there. Substack is a newsletter publishing platform that is attracting dozens and dozens and dozens of independent experts, and they handle all the monetization and the content management system. So if I were in digital marketing, I would go to substack.com and start searching for the niches that I would care about most and start following those sort of lone wolves. And you might find yourself some sort of 2021 up and coming influencers who might even pay attention to what it is you have to say.
Yeah. One of the best answers I got to that question was from one of the guys at Outreach. And he basically said, look, you know, we sell software licenses. So if we're selling to salespeople, we can sell a ton of licenses. If we're selling to PR and marketing, we can't sell as many. So it's not as hot of a sector. And obviously, if the publishers are following the money, there's not going to be as much ad dollars there because they're not selling as many software licenses. Talk to me about sort of the PR tech stack nowadays. What are the hot tools you're seeing that your clients are working with to improve productivity and media relations effectiveness?
I don't really know that much about tools. I'm an editor, and I spend most of my time talking with editors. The tools that, Tracker's not new. I know people have sort of looked at Tracker as something interesting, but I don't really work in that world, honestly.
Got it. I am going to invite Terry, who's had a couple questions, to come on and ask a question. But while I do, let me ask you something. If you were a startup, knowing what you know, if you were at a startup and you were hiring a tech PR firm, what are the most important questions you'd ask them when you're interviewing them and deciding who to hire?
This is what I'd ask them. What is the most confrontational thing you can imagine yourself saying to us? I'll say that again. What is the most confrontational thing that you could imagine saying to us? And the reason I think that's an important question is that so many agencies just kiss ass in the RFP process and the pursuit of the account. And they'll say damn near anything. This is my experience. Now, maybe I'm, slurring you here. But I deal every day with the AE and the senior AE that has a client that is just simply barely newsworthy, if that. And, it's my job to figure out how to make these people newsworthy. And I do this all the time. So I feel like I know what I'm talking about there. So I think it's the agency's responsibility to feel confident in saying, this ain't going to work, or what have you. And so that is in that you have to ask that. You have to figure out what is the limit of sort of insubordination, also known as honesty and candor. Because once you get in that marriage, you really need to be able to be frank with one another. So that I would ask that question.
Anything else? Any other questions?
I would ask, if I needed you to get 3 people on the telephone in late 2020 in the next hour to talk about anything, who would those 3 people be? Because a lot of agencies will say, oh yeah, well, I know this person, that person, they're just, they usually don't. Or they think they do, but the editor actually says, oh, who are they, right? So I would be very specific about, tell me who you can get on the phone. Like, oh, Mary, yeah, hang on a second. I'll be with you in 1 second. Oh, sorry, I got to go. I got to talk to Mary. That. How many agencies can deliver that? You got to find that out.
Anything else? This is such gold. This is such gold. That's why I'm pushing you on this.
Is it? Yeah, I know you are.
I think it is. It's really gold for this audience.
I don't know. The last thing I would ask is, think about the person that you just lost or most recently lost, like, a real star performer in your agency. Why did you lose them? And could it have been avoided? Because agencies are nothing more than IQ. They used to walk through the door every day. Now they log in on Zoom and look at this green dot on their laptop. So there's a lot of churn. One answer is, well, I could get a 25% raise if I quit and went to work for the other people. Whatever it is. But, if I'm a client, I don't want to be dealing with a revolving door, and I don't have the time to do the due diligence to, figure out, I can deal with, junior people, the account is sold by the senior people in the agency, but then of course, they're biz dev people primarily. So they're going to migrate the actual work down to AE level. and it's not so bad because it's cheaper per hour. But you do want some continuity because you got to get people up to speed and ramp them up. So that would be the third question. Third question is, the last person, all-star that you really lost, how come? And could it have been avoided? And see how they deal with that, see how defensive they are about it. You can tell right away if they're defensive about it.
Terry Kelman, you have a question?
Yeah, I'd like to ask sort of a higher level question than the ones I put on there. I work with salespeople to make sure they can engage with high-level customers and technology and so forth. And there is always, most of the big companies I've worked in, and even the small startups, there's this gigantic wall. It's 100 miles high and 20 miles wide between what goes on in the street and what's going on in the CMO's office, and especially in stuff that's digital. Even recently, advice from sales management and marketing down to salespeople is, yeah, get on Facebook and say nice things about our company. How should sales take advantage of all the brilliant work that's going on in digital marketing? Or what should digital marketers do to think about and help salespeople who are face-to-face, virtually with a customer?
See, I don't know if I have the expertise to answer that. Because I don't really work in that world, and I work in earned media editorial. I don't know if I could really answer that one effectively.
Fair enough. Sam, if someone is interested in getting a hold of you and learning more about Sam Whitmore's Media Survey, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, the website's mediasurvey.com, and there's an about page on there, and there's sort of a short cheat sheet on benefits that accrue to subscribers, and it's tilted more toward agencies, but brands get some value out of that too. So it's mediasurvey.com/about.
Got it. If you're logging in late, if you weren't here at the beginning, next week we have a B2B social media influencer panel talking about the Talkwalker 2021 social media trends report. It basically lays out the top 10 trends for 2021 in social media marketing based on research from the Talkwalker social media analytics platform. And we'll have Jenny Dietrich, Neil Schaefer, and Christina Garnett on a panel talking about the findings from that report. We hope you'll be able to join us for that. And I also want to tell you that you can download that report at ericschwartzman.com/Talkwalker. And I'd also like to thank our sponsor, IPR Software. Again, if you are looking to be more effective with your media relations in 2021, they're doing the first month free for Earned Media podcast listeners. And you can get more information at ericschwartzman.com/IPR software. Sam, great connecting with you again.
Yeah, same here.
And thanks everyone for showing up. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.